Well, welcome to Lunch Tables. Today we have a speaker who does come from PATH. Stephanie is a relentless educator, and she has been working this summer. Her and I have worked quite closely together on something really new that we're doing with a high school group of students on team building and mentoring. Stephanie has a background in that team building. Here at PATH, she works with mentors and mentees, does an outstanding job with that. She has just quite a few tools in her toolbox when it comes to understanding SEL. Today, she's going to talk about emotional literacy and how we can use that at home or in our workplace to help students. So I am going to turn it over because sometimes I can talk too much. I want to thank you for joining us for Lunch Tables. And Stephanie, it's all yours, dear.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm so glad you could all be here. Like Sandy said, I do have quite the array of background of experiences. We refer to our life as portions of BC, which was before children, and then post children. So BC was over 15 years working in the outdoor leadership industry, doing team building, ropes courses, backpacking expeditions, sailing, rock climbing, working with inner city urban youth from Baltimore and Philadelphia, and youth in the detention centers there as well. So spent a great deal of time doing that. And then we were blessed with twin girls that are now 11. And I started working for PATH a few years ago and just reinvigorated my passion for working with youth and being a mentor and being able to guide them. This last year really pushed us to explore more about SEL and how we could benefit both in our homes, in the workplace, and with the students that we work with because of COVID. And especially with our students, a lot of them were struggling a great deal. With Relentless, the peer-to-peer mentoring program that I primarily focus on, we do spend a good deal of time doing SEL with our students, but we really, really discovered the importance of it over the last year and spent a great deal of energy making sure and checking in with our kids and finding ways to help and support them, even though we couldn't be face-to-face. So a lot of this today has come out of what we've been learning and researching over the last year, but also from my multitudes of years of experience working with students and adjudicated youth as well. So I asked everyone to put a word in the box that kind of described how you're feeling today. And I love seeing the array, and I also appreciate the honesty. Honesty is incredibly important when we're talking about our emotions and not blocking them or masking them when we are sharing with others, because then people can't respond to us in an appropriate way because we're not being clear as to where we stand. Does everybody know how to use the reactions? If you know how to use reactions, and if not, at the bottom of your screen, there should be a little smiley face that says reactions, and under there is a clapping thumbs up. So I'm gonna ask a few times here and there for you guys to use the thumbs up as in a response to some questions. So to start with, I'd like to get to know how many people in this room right now are parents. And if you're a parent, go ahead and give a thumbs up. Okay, and how many people in this room right now are either educators or work with youth in some capacity? Okay, wonderful. All right, so that was just for me to get a sense of where we're at with everyone. I'm gonna go ahead and pull up my screen and share with you guys. All right, so today's topic is emotional literacy. Not to be confused, and we are going to compare here in a short bit with emotional intelligence, but the two do overlap at times. So by using the chat, how would you define emotional literacy? What would your definitions look like? Let's see. Sandy, can you help me out with the chat responses? Because when I share screen, I lose that.
I'm not seeing anything new in the chat. Can you restate the question? You want them to put it in chat?
Yeah, so in the chat box, if you guys could take a moment to think, how would you define emotional literacy? What would your definition be if you had to write one down? There we go. Awesome. I can see them now. So being able to process and understand emotions, the ability to accurately recognize and understand emotions of others as well as yourself, managing emotions, knowledge of knowing the diversity of different types of emotions, and the array of responses. These are all great. Recognizing, understanding, and being able to express. So you guys hit on a great deal of the key points of emotional literacy. So it is the ability to communicate your emotions through words, but also the ability to read them in others. And that's really important. It's the ability to understand your own personal emotions and also to listen to others and empathize with their emotions. And keep in mind that being empathetic and sympathetic are two totally different things. It's the ability to express your emotions productively. And productively is key there, because if we're not productive in the expression of our emotions, sometimes they come out as something else, and then either we are confused or others are confused in regards to our responses. So what are emotions? Can you guys give me some examples of emotions? And you can put them in the chat, or you can also feel free to unmute at any time, whatever you're comfortable with. Anger, frustration, discerning emotions, happy, sad, joy. Perfect. Surprise, fear, feeling meh. I like that, Jay. We say meh all the time at our house. Sadness, appalled. So sometimes emotions can get confused with moods, and they are a little different. But to begin with, it's important to understand that emotions, it comes from a Latin word, and it loosely translates to that which moves us. So not all things move us, but emotions do. And then just so we're all working on the same foundation here today, the definition from Oxford is a natural instinctive state of mind deriving from one's circumstances, mood, or relationships with others. So that's important. You see there that mood is part of the definition of emotions, because moods can influence our emotions and be a portion of what creates them. All right. So emotions versus mood. I've already mentioned a couple times here that they are different. How do you all think emotions are different from moods, or what makes them different? And again, you can use whatever you're comfortable with, the chat box or unmuting.
I'll jump in there with the unmute. I would say that sometimes moods can't be seen. You know, they're the unseen. Emotions are what you see tangibly. They wear on their sleeve. You know what's going on.
Okay. We've got one in the chat too from Sharbria that says, emotions can put you in a mood. And yes, absolutely, emotions can put you in a mood. One of the biggest distinctive differences between an emotion and a mood is an emotion is short-lived versus a mood is something that we can live in. We can live in a mood for hours, days, weeks, months, but an emotion, it's only there for a few minutes, rarely ever lasting more than an hour or two. We have many, many emotions throughout the day, and it's really, it can be very fascinating if you sit down even just once a day and write down a list of all the emotions you went through today, as categories of like morning, afternoon, evening, and start tracking those, and you'll start to see some trends potentially. And then you can, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that later on about tracking and trends, but it's very interesting to see how many emotions we can go through in just one day because they are so short-lived. They are reactions to something specific, such as an experience, situation, or person. So a person can trigger an emotion in us, just as much as an experience or situation can. Emotions have very identifiable triggers, whereas moods are not as specific to the trigger. There's also facial expressions associated with an emotion. Like Lewis was saying, there's something you see on the outward. There's not always a facial expression associated with a mood. And they can be far more difficult to regulate because they can come on so spontaneously and they can be triggered very quickly. Your moods, though, they can last longer, like I was saying, and go on for even days. And someone can live in a mood for a very long period of time. They can be more diffused with non-identifiable objects, persons, or situations. They can precede and give meaning to an experience or an event. What do you think that means, that a mood can precede and give meaning to an experience or an event?
Well, I think it means, I think it means almost like it can be a precursor. Like you can, the paradigm at which you see, like because of your mood, you can see something as different than what it really is.
Absolutely. And sometimes a previous experience can either brighten the mood that we have going into an experience again, or it can shadow the mood going in. Because maybe we went to a, so for example, you're going to a fair. Maybe the last time you went to the fair, you slipped and fell and you broke your arm. So then going to the fair the following year, you may have some pending anxiety, and it sets a mood of fear and possible, dread in going. But if the previous year when you went to the fair, you had a blast and you met a new friend and you had a really good time, then going to the fair is something that the mood going into it is brightened and we're excited to go to it. So our previous experiences and people can impact the moods we have going into an event again that might be similar. So they are the lens through which we see life, essentially. Any questions on the difference between emotions and moods? Okay, we are going to leave moods behind and continue to focus on emotions. So emotions have purpose. What do you think the purpose of emotions are? Why do we have them? What do they do for us? How do they serve us? And you can use the chat or unmute if you have any thoughts. How does an emotion serve you?
I think it is, I think Lisa was about to say something. Go ahead.
It's okay, Lois. I appreciate it. I was just going to say, I guess I could come on video too. Some emotions are protective, like fear and anxiety. They can actually keep us safer.
Absolutely, Lisa. You're completely correct in that regard. The whole fight or flight instinct can be triggered by our emotions of fear or anger or sense of lack, like not being in a safe situation. And those things they actually do put your body into a physical state of certain things become heightened. So sound, hearing, vision, they become more than they normally would be. Your peripheral vision widens, your hearing gets more, I'm struggling for words for some reason today, but you get better hearing, you can hear more sounds coming in, but then other portions of your body actually start to shut down so that your body can focus its energy on those, because those are the things that it needs to make sure it's keeping you safe. We also have some things here. I see it says express how we feel, provide expression for current state, and to express who you are and the beauty of your unique personality. Those are all absolutely things that fall into our emotions. But every single one of our emotions do take care of us in a certain way. And when that emotion is occurring in our bodies, certain things are heightened and other things back off. And our bodies just do all of these things on their own. Emotions also motivate us to take action. Any thoughts or ideas on what an example would be of an emotion motivating you to take action? Let's see.
I think when you're passionate about certain things, I think the passion can be motivated by frustration. It could be motivated by anger. It could be motivated by excitement. So I think it can be motivated by a lot of different things. But for me, I think when I see some type of social injustice or something out there that this really doesn't set right for me, it just depending on how my emotion responds to that's what drives me to want to make a difference. It wants me to speak out. It wants me to share my heart and help to do what I can.
Right. And I would agree with that. And then I saw in the chat fear. Fear does motivate us to take action, and fear can motivate us to take action in a variety of ways. In some cases, it may mean that we run. In some cases, it may mean that we cover our faces because there might be something coming towards us. So our emotions, though they're short-lived, they do, as we were saying, take care of us and protect us. What else did we have in here in the chat? Okay, emotion of not liking the feeling of being financially challenged makes us want to create income supplement ideas. So I think that kind of falls into the idea of having something to be passionate about, to move forward and to be successful on. So absolutely, I would agree with that as well. Emotions prepare our body for immediate action. They help us survive, thrive, and avoid danger. So I know this tends to make it look like the only emotions we're looking at here are things like anger and fear, but those are the ones that have the most protection over us. So even though we don't want to be an angry person or a fearful person all the time, it's still good to have those from time to time. People who experience no fear or no anger, they're the ones that have a far higher level of risky behaviors because they don't have that sense of protection over themselves. They allow others to understand us, and it allows us to understand others as well. So back and forth on that. They do influence our thoughts. So that comment about not liking to be financially, like wanting to be financially fluid. So if you are feeling anxious about your financial status, that will then cause you to take action and motivate you to want to become more financially fluid, which then makes you look at other options of how to do that. And that is a whole influence on your thought pattern. They help us make decisions and act with minimal thought. And then lastly, they motivate our future behaviors. All right, so just to wrap up the purpose of emotions, they're here to help us, guide us, and protect us by providing cues that help others to determine how to behave towards us. And I'm sorry, can you hear my dog? Because apparently my kids didn't listen and let her in. So did you know that your fate, because we talked about how emotions are different from mood, and emotions, you can see them on your face. A mood is something that you can keep within you, but did you know that everybody's faces has around 90 muscles, 30 of which have the sole purpose of signaling emotion to other people, whether we're choosing to do that or not. And I would encourage you, when you're out walking around, to look at people's faces. Stop looking at your phone, stop looking at your shoes, stop looking at the ground, which I know I'm really guilty of, looking at the ground. But look at other people's faces and see, I mean, you don't have to interact with them, but see how many different emotions you think you're passing over. Oh, I know why. I know why my dogs are barking. My children decided to go take care of the chickens, which means the dogs have to be inside. So I apologize. They'll be back out in a minute. All right, so primary emotions and their purposes. How many primary emotions do you think there are in totality? With a number. You don't need to list what they are, but how many do you think there are? Infinite, but 39. Lewis, have you been doing some homework? Infinite, but 39. Any other guesses? All right, so 30 plus, 30. All right, so you guys all kind of seem to be in the same ballpark here of how many you think there are. So for primary emotions, I want you to kind of start thinking about emotions in the sense of a color wheel. Is everyone familiar with a color wheel? Remember that from grade school? You got your primary colors and then your secondary colors. And so emotions can be broken down that way as well. All right, awesome. I'm seeing some other numbers here. We've got 8, 6. So our primary emotions actually are 8. So we're gonna start with the first 4 here, and I've got 4 little faces here. If you were to attach one emotion to each of these faces, what do you think these 4 faces stand for? Renee, if I had candy, I would toss you some. If you had to give one emotion to these 4 little faces, what do you think they might be? We're just starting with these first 4, and then we'll jump to the next 4. All right, so you guys definitely got a few of those. We've got anger, and the purpose of anger is to fight against our problems. Anticipation, and its purpose is to look forward to and plan. Joy is to remind us what's important, and trust is to connect us with others. All right, how about these four? What do you think these four are? All right, let's see. What did you guys come up with? Yikes, uh-oh, sad, grr, afraid, sad, nervous, discontent, irritated. All right. So yes, you got some of them, absolutely. So fear is to protect us from danger. Surprise helps us to focus on new situations. And sadness is to connect us with those we love. Disgust is to reject what is unhealthy. So we were talking about how things protect us. Disgust is another one that helps to protect us from things that are unhealthy. So you're not going to eat something if it totally disgusts you, because then it's probably something that might make you sick. All right. Any questions on the 8 primary emotions? Because we're going to build on these now. So what happens on a color wheel when you start mixing colors together? What do you get? You get new colors. So what do you think happens when we start mixing our emotions together? Can you have more than one emotion at a time? What do you think? We get new emotions, and we absolutely can have more than one emotion. Can somebody give me an example? You don't have to tell me what the experience was, but think about some of your experiences and when you had more than one emotion attached to it. What are some of those emotions that got mixed together?
I personally I've been excited and afraid at the same time. When I went to Cedar Point with the youth ministry, and I don't like roller coasters, and they got me to go on one, and I experienced both.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm seeing nervous and excited. I've definitely been nervous and excited. I'm also seeing here someone put down grief and relief. So, you know, my whole family just experienced grief and relief at the same time. One of our farm animals passed away, which was incredibly sad, especially for my one daughter who was his primary caregiver. But it was also real relief because we weren't sure how we were going to move him. And we are moving in 2 weeks, and he wasn't doing well. So there was grief because he passed, but relief because we didn't have to put him through the stress of a big move. So sometimes, even when we have what we might consider a negative emotion mixed with a positive emotion, it makes it so it's not all negative. So Plutchik put this wheel of emotions together. So you can see that those 8 primary emotions are just on the outside of the center wheel. Can you guys see my arrow? Okay, so these are those 8 primary emotions. And then when you start mixing them together, you start to get other emotions. And these can continue to go on and on and on. So I did notice that one of you mentioned earlier that there's an infinite number of emotions out there. And there has been a great deal of debate in the scientific world as to how many emotions are there. Some people say there's only 8 emotions and the rest of it is all gravy. And then some people start to say that all of these blends that make new emotions, that they all add up to continuing on to calculating how many emotions there are. So having words for emotions leads us to understanding, which leads us to the purpose of that emotion. Now, I want you guys to think, a number of you said that you work with youth. How often have you found that you have a youth, whether it's because they're overly excited or they're struggling or they're afraid or they're incredibly upset? How many of you have found that they struggle for words to put with those emotions, and so then they don't know how to express them? And you can just use a thumbs up or the so when we can't express our emotions, what happens? And you can use the chat for that. When you can't express your emotions, what happens? Frustration, negative emotions come into play, miscommunications, shut down. Yep, absolutely, shutting down, bottling up, and or we tend to see anger, resentment, frustration, depression, and yes, blow-ups. Blow-ups or breakdowns. So 3 of the big things that we tend to see are shutdown, blow-up, or breakdown when we don't know how to express our emotions. And even as adults, we can go through those things as well. But over the years, we've hopefully learned how to understand and manage our emotions a little bit more and know what might be leading up to that before we hit those breakdowns or blow-ups or shutdowns. But youth, they actually don't have the capacity in their brains yet to completely understand how to prevent reaching those points of shutdown, blow up, or breakdown. So if you are PATH staff, I have shared this link with you before. If you are not PATH staff, I encourage you to go to this link, and we can put this in the chat. And it's a way for you to navigate through and get a better understanding of emotions. And then by understanding each of these emotions that are on this wheel, it helps you to express them better and to guide others in expressing them within themselves. So let's see here real quick. Oops. I will, when we do breakout rooms, I will copy this and I will put this link in the chat box so that you have access to it. All right, any questions on the wheel of emotions or the number of emotions or why we have emotions?
No questions, but it's good. I like this. It's pretty good.
Thanks, Lewis. All right, so benefits of being emotionally literate. What are the benefits? What do you think how does it benefit you to be emotionally literate personally? And how does it benefit you when interacting with others to be emotionally literate? Let's see.
So I'll just talk again. So it helps you to be more aware of your own life emotionally. And then I think when you're in touch with that, it'll allow you to help and understand others when it comes to their emotions versus not having that awareness of what other people might go through and things like that.
Absolutely. And then I also see on here, it helps with empathy and compassion. Absolutely. It does help you to work with others. Okay. So let's take a look at what I have here and see what we can add to what you guys already put out there. So it is the ability to handle our emotions in a way that improves personal power. And if we have the ability to handle our emotions, we do feel personally stronger as an individual, which leads us to be more successful in anything that we are trying to attempt. Yep, it helps you to function and complete and be a functional human being. It also improves the quality of life around you. So if you are able to handle and understand your own personal emotions, you are increasing your own personal quality of life. And in exchange, you are also increasing the quality of life of those around you. It helps you to be effectively, appropriately, and productively express your emotions. It gives you the ability to have positive social interactions. It improves our relationships between others. And then it makes us cooperative work. It makes cooperative work possible. So that relates to working, you know, when we talk to about our youth working on projects together, when we are in the workplace, when we're doing volunteer work with others, it helps us to make work possible when we are able to be productive and understand our emotions. All right. So we're getting close to time for breakout rooms. So I'm going to pull this up to a closure here in the next few minutes. But having knowledge of your emotions is really important, because how you choose to think, feel, and act in relation to life challenges often impacts your health and well-being, as well as your mindset. So give me some examples of how you are thinking and feeling impact your health and well-being, whether they be positive impacts or negative impacts, either or.
Can you ask that question again? I'm trying to.
Yes. So what would be an example of how the way in which you think, feel, or act impacts your health and well-being?
Well, I guess. Oh, go ahead, Jason. My fault.
No, you're fine. If I'm comprehending what you're asking, I'm thinking this is just how my brain's working, that like if you think negative all the time, then your body's going to feel the results of that. You're going to feel the stress of the, you know, the negativity, the toxicity of that. If you're happy, then your body kind of responds to optimism. You know, is that kind of what you're asking? Is that
Exactly.
okay? All right.
Yes. And I'm
So
seeing
yes,
a
your
good deal of
physical
that
body,
in the
yeah,
in
your
the chat
physical
as well.
body will respond to how your emotions dictate your physical, you know, like laughter is the best medicine for the soul, they say, right? So when you laugh and when you are constantly in a good mood and optimistic, then your body, then you feel like you can reach for the stars. You have a little bit more energy and that kind of stuff there. So yes, I would definitely say that your body, the physical body, gets affected by the way that our emotions dictate us.
Absolutely. And that's exactly where I was going. And we all have had experiences where we've walked into a room and there's been a person where their joy and excitement is so contagious that you can't help but be excited and happy, even if you're not quite sure why they're so excited and happy. And vice versa. You've walked into a room where there's somebody who's just so angry or so just negative that it makes you feel bad for even being there or in their presence, and you kind of carry that away with you when you walk out of that room as well. Yes, and I see someone here put in there, long held anger keeps the body under constant stress, and that is absolutely true as well. And grief can put the body under some extreme stress. They've actually found that grief can, if it's extreme enough, can change the shape and productivity of your heart on your body. And until you're able to let that grief go, the heart functions at a lower rate, and it puts you and potentially your health at risk. So it's not just anger that can cause our bodies to be in a negative space. It can also be things like constant frustration and constant anxiety and constant grief that can also cause significant impacts on our physical beings. And our physical and our mental and emotional all go connected. So it's not just about what the knowledge you gain on emotions is, it's also about what you do with that knowledge that makes a really big difference. So understanding the difference between emotions and moods is incredibly important, especially when we're talking with kids, because we need to understand, are they experiencing an emotion or are they in a mood? And once we can differentiate between those two things, that helps us to help them and guide them and move them in a positive direction if they're stuck somewhere negative, or to support them when they are also already in a positive place. So lastly, I just want to share with you some tips and some places on tracking emotions. Why do you think it might be important to even bother to track emotions? What does this do for us?
I think it can, what's the word? I want to say like predict your future, but it can kind of, I don't know, track, when you track them, you know what I'm saying? It's doing something.
Regulate your health.
Yeah, your health, you know, I guess the best way I can put it is predict your future, but that's not really how I want to say it, but you know.
Well,
Yeah.
Jay just put in here, maybe this is the line of thinking you were having, Lewis, that it helps to track patterns. And then Shabria put help you overall help. So when we can track patterns, it helps us to predict how we might respond in the future. And if we know how we might respond in the future to certain situations and experiences, it helps us to prepare for them. So if we know that something is dangerous and risky, then maybe we're going to make the choice to not be a part of that because of the emotions that we experienced last time. It also does help us to identify unhealthy and healthy situations and triggers for how our emotions might respond going forward. So you guys got absolutely all of that. But how many of us actually sit down every day and track our emotions? I know some people do, and they do it in a variety of ways. What are some ways that you can track your emotions?
Well, for those that work with youth, you could do daily check-ins, you can do those types of things. Somebody mentioned journaling, self-evaluation, reflections on your own self, just kind of looking back over, you know, man, I could have really been a better person yesterday. Just kind of recognizing just how you feel in general. So there's just several different ways. I guess it just depends on the audience that you're working with.
Yep. There's a lot of ways. You know, some people journal, some people draw, some people, in fact, my daughter, for example, she's 11 and she's been really struggling with managing emotions and how to respond to situations. And so she has a special calendar that she puts different colored faces on each day to show what was the biggest emotion she remembered from that day. You know, so if the biggest emotion for the day was happy, then she puts a yellow face on the calendar for that day. And we just started doing this about a month ago with her, and it helps her to see, oh, I had a lot of happy days, or I had a lot of mad days, or a lot of frustrated days. And then we're able to talk through what made those days happy or frustrating. And so she's gaining a better understanding of how to avoid some of the negative emotions that she doesn't want to experience. So it helps us to make choices going forward and plan, absolutely. And there's a lot of ways to do it. Now, we live in a very technologically saturated world, and almost every single teenager we come across has a phone or some sort of device. So I wanted to share with you all, I did a bunch of research and I talked to a lot of people on apps, because there's an app for everything, right? And I can send out to anyone after this. I have a description of all of these apps and what they do and how to access them. But these are all, I hate that they call them mood trackers when you look them up in your app stores, because they're not mood trackers. They're not tracking moods. They're tracking emotions and feelings and behaviors. And some of them are very simple, as something like what my daughter does with a colored smiley face on a calendar for that day. It's on their phones. Or they get more complicated and you start filling in, and it's more like journaling and adding in details like, this is where I was, these are the people that were involved, this is the experience that happened, and this is the emotion that I had. So there's a number of them out there. Like I said, I find it unfortunate that they call them mood trackers or mood something, because they really are focusing on emotions. Some of them you can even connect with if you see a therapist, you can connect them with your therapist, and then your therapist is able to watch the trends as well, so that you can work through those in any of your one-on-one or group sessions that you have in any sort of therapeutic setting. And some professional therapists also have private ones that have specific securities through their facilities. But these can be a really cool way to see over a period of time. Now, 1 week is not going to set your trends. You have to do this for a long period of time. Okay. So these are just some quotes that have inspired and talking with students over the last year and a half while we were doing COVID, and I pulled from them. And these are the ones that they found to be the most impactful when it came to talking about emotions. So I'll just leave that up there. You all know how to read. But we are going to do breakout rooms for the lunch portion of this today. And I'm going to put a couple of questions in the chat box for you to discuss during lunch tables.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. We've lost a few, which sometimes happens during the lunch hour. I had a chance to go into 2 of the breakout rooms and really hear some wonderful dialogue about what we've learned today and how it applies. We're going to share out breakout room 1. Who remembers your breakout room numbers? Shabria, wasn't that your breakout room number 1? Oh, you were 2. Renee, were you in room 2? You were, Lewis?
I
1?
don't remember the number. I just remember it showing up to go to the.
I can go first, Sandy.
Okay, Shabria, we'll start with breakout.
Okay, so yeah, we had a great conversation in our group. So as far as the first question of how important, now that we understand emotions and moods, how is that helping us kind of with our youth? We kind of just talked about in the classroom, how we learned how not to take things personally. So for me, particularly, if I go into a classroom and there's some problem students, as we may call them, or a student that seems like they might be in a bad mood, or someone who continuously gets in trouble, or seems to be maybe challenging our authority, not to take that personally and to recognize like, hey, there's probably something more than what meets the eye that's going on with the student, okay? Maybe they're hungry, maybe they're not in a happy home, maybe they didn't get any sleep last night, whatever it might be, maybe they got in an argument before they start the class. It's just helping us to understand emotion more and helping us to regulate our own emotion as the adults in the situation, that we don't have to match their frustration, their anger, or their mood that they're having. So that kind of really helps me because, you know, sometimes I would think of it, oh, you know, they're trying to question our authority, but then it's really not even always that. It's a lot of times something much more deeper than just that. As far as our takeaways, we talked about personally, someone said how important emotions are to dealing with life and relationships, and understanding the ability to be able to understand your personal emotions. And once you are able to do that, how much more of a fuller whole life you can have by just being able to regulate and understand your own emotions, which I think is so good, because then in relation to dealing with other people, that's going to impact those relationships. My biggest takeaway that I kind of talked about was just my day-to-day dealing with individuals and dealing with people just in the marketplace, restaurants, traffic, whatever it is. Kind of that same mentality as I was saying that I had a past in like management and dealing with customer service. So customer service is really important to me. So I would get highly irritated if like maybe I'm ordering something, someone's rude or mean, and I was nice and bubbly. But then I kind of take that same mentality of maybe they are just having the worst day. Maybe they absolutely hate their job, but they cannot quit because they just can't afford to, right? Maybe someone just passed away. Of course, that doesn't take away or make excuses for the bad behavior, but I think it just helps us to operate more out of a space of grace and empathy, because we all have bad days. I know I do. And so it kind of makes me think twice before I come back at them and meet their energy, their negative energy. So those are just a few things. We talked about a lot, but overall, those are some of the things that we kind of said for takeaways.
Sharbria, you nailed it. You just
Thank you.
nailed it.
Thank you.
Your group did.
They were
I just
awesome.
think, what if this whole country, we took that mindset of grace and empathy? What could we do together, you know?
Anything.
Anything. You're right. I was driving today and I was watching a traffic situation, and this lady couldn't get around the other lady who was trying to turn into Dunkin' Donuts. And I knew that lady who couldn't get by was going to have a look, you know, and I just could see it in her driving that she was very frustrated and trying to get through. And at first I thought, you know, what a jerk. That was my first initial thought. And then my second thought was exactly what you talked about, Sharbria. You know what? Maybe she just got in a fight with her husband, you know, maybe she has a sick kid and she's trying to get something for it. We don't know. So we always have to remember that everybody has a story to tell. And it's all different. So you nailed it. Thank you to your group. All right. Lewis.
All right, so we had a really good group. We had Sandy and Stephanie pop in at times too, so we appreciate that. And we had Renee, Kayla, we had Kiana. We also had Jennifer, which she was a teacher. She had to leave because she had class or whatever, but she offered up some good points too. And I think kind of what surrounded what we were talking about, we kind of dug back and said, talked a little bit about just how past generations are versus today's generations. You know, back then I can remember when something was told me and I did it just because I knew mom and dad knew best. You know, today we can't approach our teens like that. So we talked a little bit about that and knowing the emotional piece, the things that we talked about and learned today, we can, because the generation is different, because we can't just say, do this, do that, that's not received anymore. So now we have to understand the emotional side of it because we can't approach them like we were approached, and so we talked a little bit about that. We also talked a little bit about how, what we learned today, how being in the classroom setting and teaching the kids is a benefit for us because now we're not looking at emotional responses as a bad thing. Of course, it's not the best thing, but when we do get those responses, because we are equipped with literacy in this area, now we can look at that as, hey, that's not a bad thing because it's letting us know what's going on with them. And so we can take that ammo and now get into their worlds because we know that that emotion came from somewhere versus chastising or what's the other word? I guess it's chastising them for something that they do. We're able to take this knowledge and get behind it. I think also today, one of my biggest takeaways is knowing that with emotional literacy, I think it starts with you because you're understanding you. And now that's helping you to understand others. And there was something that Stephanie said I wanted to mention. And, oh my gosh, I had it. But it'll come back to me. But it was another takeaway I wanted to add with that. She said something that was really key. But yeah, we had a good conversation. And like I say, we just related it to, and Renee, she brought up some good points too. But we related it to pain in your body. When something's hurting, it's telling you something. You know what I'm saying? It's letting you know something's wrong. And so when we get those responses from them, and Sandy, reinforced kind of what we talked about it too, it's letting you know something's happening. And then you can take that and do something with it. So.
Thank you, Lois. Another very powerful conversation in that group. And one word that just keeps popping and rising to the surface in this conversation and the takeaways is regulation, self-regulation. And I think it was Finley had asked about SEL. I kept talking about SEL. SEL is the social emotional learning. And in the state of Indiana, we have competencies for that are to be taught in the classroom, K-12. And that's based on 7 competencies, and one of them is regulation. And regulation is the ability to recognize and manage one's emotions. Regulation skills build positive self-control, self-discipline, and impulse control. So we have to have it ourselves first, model it, show it, recognize when they're in need of it. So thank you, Lois and Shabria so far. Jason, are you sharing out for your group?
Before Jay shares, I just wanted to piggyback on what Sandy said in being able to regulate and acknowledge them within ourselves. And even as adults, we all slip up and we might mess up and we might blow up and we might yell and we might melt down or shut down. But being able to acknowledge that that happened afterwards and then having the appropriate discussions with the people that impacted and or apologizing for them instead of ignoring that it happened shows that we can recognize and acknowledge it within ourselves. It shows that we ourselves are human and that not just teens, not just kids experience those shutdowns, those breakdowns and those meltdowns, that even as adults, they can happen. Maybe not to the extent of like a 3-year-old's temper tantrum laying on the floor at Walmart because they didn't get a candy bar. But if we can then talk it through and out and potentially, if need be, apologize, that shows recognition to the others, especially our students and our youth and our own personal kids, that we acknowledge what happened and we're learning from it and we're finding ways to avoid and or deal with them going forward. So then it teaches them those same skills as well. Sorry, Jay, go ahead.
That's okay. I think Lewis has something to say.
Oh, it came back to me. It always. So when you talked about the muscles in the face and the 30 muscles that have to deal with emotion, Like I will never forget that now. And so now I'm like, I almost can't wait to just like do some people watching and kind of see what's going on. But also when we get in the classroom, that adds a filter to my eyes. So now instead of just trying to teach my lesson, I'm watching. I'm seeing what's going on. So thank you for that, because that really, I don't know, it just does something. When you get that knowledge, it's like you're armed now and you can use it, you know, so it empowered me to use it. So I just want to say that.
Well, what
'Cause there's a
about
lot of
people that
times we
have,
walk-
sorry, I'm sorry about that. I was gonna ask about the face muscles because I think I have that face that can look mean when I'm not smiling. So what if it's just that, because I'm a very bubbly, outgoing person, but I could think about like if I'm in the office just sitting, I don't think I look nice. So what about that? It doesn't necessarily always indicate your moods, correct?
Not always, no, but it can be a big indicator. And you know, we all have resting muscles, and
Yeah.
unfortunately, there's been some unfriendly terms put to our resting muscle faces that I
That
won't
resting,
repeat.
they said a resting bee face.
Because I feel like I as well fall into that category, and a lot of times people think I'm mad or I'm just
Yeah.
like unapproachable, when really I might just be focused
Yeah.
or thinking about something, or you know, figuring something out in my own head. So yes, sometimes they can be deceiving, and that's true. But like Lewis was saying, it can add an additional filter to what we're doing. Because how many times do we
Yeah.
walk into a classroom, walk into a room, we don't bother to actually look at the people that we are talking to or engaging with, because we are so focused on a mission of what we're there to do. And it's true. It's really important that we take a moment and take a pause and pay attention to all the people in the room, and take a moment to kind of scan through and look at faces and get a feel. And that may right there indicate, especially if it's a classroom where it's kids you're seeing day after day or on regular intervals, it may indicate to you like, oh, every week I come in and they look like this, and then all of a sudden they look like this. And maybe I should check in. Maybe there's something really awesome going on in their life right now, or maybe there's something that they need some help or support with, because you notice that change. And that's more where it comes in, especially with people that we're working with on a regular basis. But it is kind of fun to just people watch and see if we in our own heads can figure out, are they happy? Are they, you know, like I said, not approaching them. But Lewis, you have your hand up?
I'll say this in response, because I know we can go on and on with this kind of stuff. It's good stuff. But to answer, to say kind of something with Sharbir was saying, I think you do have those resting faces and different things. But I also think that kind of what Stephanie was hitting on with the difference between the emotions and the mood. Like sometimes if you discern the mood that's going on, so like for me being in athletics, if I'm pushing a kid and then they're like having this face and I can tell like it's like a give up quit face, or maybe they just need a little encouragement. I've been in it for a little while where I can almost tell, because it kind of coincides with the mood of what's happening. So it's almost like, and I don't think anybody can be an expert, but I think like, for instance, like Sandy's been around that scholastic environment for a while, so you could probably like pick things up like that. Whereas for me, I don't have that many years in it. So this training is valuable for me because it'll help me to fashion myself more, so that when I get in that scholastic environment, I'm like, oh, you know what? That's what that is. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know. That's kind of what I get from it. Being able to discern the emotional as well as the mood of different activities or environment kind of thing. I think it can help us to kind of pick up on things, you know.
Well said, Lewis. Thank you. All right, Jason, your group.
Well, I just concur with everybody else's statements. I mean, you guys really said it all and just hit it on the head. No, really, I don't even know if I'm the chosen spokesperson for my group. I had two awesome people who shared a little bit about their takeaways and so on and so forth. But really, when you hear the whole conversation, basically what we're talking about, and you can sum it up in one word, is the word communication. You know, we got to think about that's what social emotional learning is. Whether you're verbal or nonverbal, within that component is communication. Someone's trying to communicate to you how they're feeling. And sometimes when they are conflicted with inside of themselves, they don't know how to explain it. And that's why behaviors happen. That's why actions happen. That's why outbursts and so on and so forth. So not only is a verbal, but we also have to look at the paraverbal. And that's what you guys were talking about here. The body language, the kinesics, all that other kind of stuff that you have to play into factor when it comes to that, because, facial expressions and the way that somebody crosses their arms, sluggish, not feeling good. I mean, there's all kinds of things that plays into that. So really, it just kind of sums it up to the one word of just how we communicate with each other. And that's why, there's nothing better than a face-to-face versus texting and email. Sometimes you can misinterpret that, right? And sometimes it's misinterpreted because how we're feeling that day, or maybe there was a little bit of resentment, or maybe there was a little offense that took place between a coworker a couple days before that, and you didn't really resolve a whole lot of stuff. So anyways, there's all kinds of stuff that goes into that, and that's called the communication portion of that. But the group that I was with, their biggest takeaway from the whole presentation really is the color wheel. They absolutely loved how the color wheel presented and shown how all the emotions and moods kind of, weave together, and how they all play into the different parts of that. So that was kind of what we talked about, from in our group there. The color wheels, the difference between the emotions and moods, and just the fact of just learning how to communicate and reading and how to understand when they're trying to communicate. And that's important because sometimes people aren't loud and boisterous like myself, right? They're not going to come out and tell you how they feel, and they're going to respond, and they're going to communicate through their actions, through their way of just, maybe crossing their arms and being quiet that way, shutting down. So I think it's a good conversation, good stuff today. Job well done, Stephanie, and I appreciate all the great takeaways and feedback. So that's all I have.
Stephanie, is there anything you want to say to wrap up? Or let's ask our other guest. Anybody else have anything they want to share? Okay, Stephanie, if you'd like to have some closing words.
So I wanted to thank you all for being here and taking the time to listen to everything I had to say. I also appreciate all the engagement that I got. So that was wonderful. And I love hearing back from everyone as well and your takeaways, because it impacts how I share going forward. Thank you, Kelly. Have a great day. And the programming that I do as well. So thank you for your insight. And like I said, it always impacts what I do going forward, but I appreciate you all being here. So have a wonderful day.